Hi students! We are now going to start looking at the Archaic period in Greek art. The Archaic period runs about the breadth of the 6th century BCE, and the term archaic, well, the word archaic means old-fashioned or obsolete, outdated, and this is a term given to this period of art by, honestly, art history snobs, art historians who preferred the later Greek art. So when Greek was flourishing and it's all great and seen as like the height of Greek art and culture, they looked back at this century, this 100-year period, just before the rise and the flourishing of the Greek world. They looked back at this and said, it's not as good. It's not as beautiful. It's not as accurate. It's kind of dusty and crusty and clunky. It's archaic in comparison. So it's a derogatory term given to this period, but it is completely unfair to call this art archaic. We're going to use it as a period style term, but I want you to understand that it is during the Archaic period that we see the foundations of Greek art, Greek architecture and temples, Greek statuary, Greek painting, all establish themselves firmly in the Archaic period. Let's look at our first artwork from the Archaic period. Here he is. He is referred to as the Kouros, or his nickname, the Metropolitan Kouros. Ooh, Metropolitan. Oh. He's called the Metropolitan Kouros because he is owned and on display at the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York City. So that's how he gets his nickname. Now, he is a Kouros, which is your next vocabulary term. A kouros, a standing male statue of a Greek youth presented nude with one foot set forward. These kouros served as votive dedications for athletes at temples and others as grave markers. The kouros is the male counterpart to the kori. The kori is a statue of a young woman, and she's clothed and presented as an offering. The Kouros is the male version of that. The difference is being that he's nude. And there is usually some form of activation of the space forward. Activation of the space? What do you mean? Well, he is frontal. He stands, and we best appreciate him from the front. But he does advance one leg forward. His arms are stiff at his sides, and one leg is placed in front of him. This looks remarkably similar to the kind of figures we saw in the ancient Greek world, the ancient Egyptian world, right? Like Menkare and his wife. Well, that makes sense now because we know that they were heavily influenced by ancient Egyptian art. So, serving as a counterpart to the young maiden, the Kori, these male statues would have been placed as gifts in front of temples, and they also served as grave markers. We saw a grave marker in the geometric period, right? That geometric crater. The geometric craters, we see a transition from grave markers or pots used as grave markers into this figurative statuary during the Archaic period. So it just becomes in fashion to use these larger figure statues to mark graves rather than the craters or the amphora with those painted decorations. We believe this young man was a grave marker. We don't have a lot of context of where he was originally placed or what his original purpose was, but he is a beautiful example of the advancements in anatomy that we see in figurative statues during the Archaic period. What, Miss Cortez? Okay. Let's think of him in terms of proportions. How is he improving in comparison to the Mantiklos Apollo? Well, he stands with a firmer indication of body. He still has been reduced to simple planes of triangles and ovals, but there is a better sense of mass in those arms. The artist is starting to carve the marble rather than carve into it with lines to give us the pecs and the abs. The hair, the neck, much more better proportions. The statue would have been brightly painted. There is indication of pigment on his hair, so imagine he would have been painted a flesh tone, and then his hair would have been black curly hair resting on his shoulder, behind his shoulders. There is some stylization of the musculature, right? We have his shoulder blades indicated here with this line work and those elbows. But also, look at how fantastic these knees look. The artists are starting to have indications of muscle mass and bone structure. Yes, it's still stylized, but it is more accurate than what we've seen in the past. Look at that. So we have these braided ringlets of hair and a headband over his head. His face, some students will ask me, why is he so bug-eyed? Why does his eyes bulge out like that? Well, remember that they would have been painted. So there would have been an iris, a colored eye. And then, yeah, okay, I give it to you. He does look very flat or mask-like. What I mean by mask-like, well, the artist has indicated a face, a jawline, but then there's no incorporation of the features. It's just like ears, eyes, eyebrows, nose, mouth. There's no transition of jaw. There's no movement under the jawline. There's no indication of cheekbones or eye sockets. So there is limited depiction of the facial features, but they're there. He stands at 6 feet 7 inches. The guy is massive. Now, he would be over life size. The average male Greek at this time was about 5'4", 5'5". So he stands larger than life, and this might be an indication of his importance. He would have been accompanied by some base that would inscribe who he was or what his purpose is. And the fact that he is completely nude, this brings into the discussion an understanding of body and perfection that the Greeks would have completely understood. Now remember, I said that the Greek mythology, the Greek religion, believes that their gods and goddesses are physically perfect, beautiful human specimen. As a Greek citizen, it was your duty to then make yourself as physically perfect and fit as a reflection of your dedication to the gods and goddesses, specifically men. The male body was seen as a representation of physical perfection. The woman, all those curves, all that's going on, they were seen as inferior physically. And so when we look at a nude male figure in the Greek world, we need to appreciate it as an expression of physical perfection and therefore the person's dedication to the gods and the goddesses, to their faith and to their country. Another reason why he is nude is so that you can see this body. If you cover it with clothing, it's not that guys were running around naked all the time, although many of them liked to. It's not that they never wore clothes. It's a way to appreciate the physical form of the male body. Also, an argument for having these figures as nude is to not limit them to a time or a place. Think about it. Fashion changes all the time, and to wear certain clothes of a certain style or a certain period of time, it dates a figure, right? Oh, that's so 1970s. Oh, that's so bougie of you. So to limit status and to limit time of the figure would be nude, so that it is timeless. It is existent as a female, as a figure, without limitations of place or time. So we're going to see this nude male figure again and again, and I want us to appreciate it as this expression of faith, expression of perfection and dedication to the gods. And I want us to examine this form as it advances in expression of anatomy, musculature, proportions, movement of the body. Our next artwork